The scorching midday savanna. An ATV was racing through, kicking up clouds of dust. Sweat beaded on Scott's forehead as he gripped the wheel. At 67 years old, a senior ranger who had spent 40 years on this land, he was a veteran, but rescue calls always made his heart race. A voice crackled through the radio. Near the northern water source, a Thompson's gazelle was caught in the wire fence. Scott pressed harder on the accelerator. This was a race against time. Then it happened. A massive pit appeared suddenly ahead. He hit the brakes, but it was too late. The ATV's front wheels sliced through empty air and plunged downward. With a dull thud, the vehicle flipped onto its side, and Scott's body was thrown to the ground. The moment his head struck a rock, the world went dark. He lost consciousness. Under the burning sun, on the red earth, an old man lay collapsed. How much time had passed? A chilling laugh echoed from the distance. Hyenas. 4, 5, 6 of them slowly approached, sniffing the air, the scent of blood, the smell of death. Their eyes glittered with hunger, the sound of footsteps drawing closer. Right then, a low growl rumbled across the savanna. 5 massive silhouettes emerged from the distance. White-furred albino lions. They approached slowly, with majestic strides. The hyenas backed away. Before the lions' intimidating presence, they were nothing but cowards. The lions approached Scott, sniffing the air. The largest male lion nudged Scott's shoulder with his nose, but when there was no response, he slowly circled around him. And then, he sat down. All 5 lions quietly settled around Scott in a circle. It looked as if they had chased away the hyenas and claimed their prey, but they didn't attack. No biting, no clawing. They just stayed still and waited, as if waiting for something, for someone. But why? Time rewinds to 10 years ago. That summer, a brutal drought consumed the savanna. Grass withered and crumbled, water holes cracked and split open. Animals collapsed one by one. That day, Scott was on patrol as usual. He saw something moving on the parched earth. As he drew closer, his heart sank. 5 albino lion cubs, white-furred little ones crying weakly. Their fur was covered in dust, their eyes half closed. If he'd been any later, they would have died. Beside them lay an albino mother lion. Her body was already cold. She had died of dehydration and starvation. The cubs wouldn't leave their dead mother's side, still searching for milk. Scott pulled out his radio and reported the situation to headquarters, but the response was cold. Resources were limited. They couldn't rescue all 5. Just leave it to nature. Scott turned off the radio and looked down at the cubs. Little eyes gazed up at him, eyes pleading for life, eyes filled with desperate will to survive. He made a decision, not as a ranger who had done this work for 40 years, but as a human being. He loaded the cubs into his vehicle one by one and brought them to his home. He built a temporary shelter in his backyard. Every night he fed them milk, gave them fluids to prevent dehydration, disinfected their wounds, and applied medicine. His colleagues said he was crazy. His supervisor warned him about violating regulations. But Scott didn't stop. A year passed and the cubs grew healthy. It was time for them to return to the wild. Scott took them deep into the savanna and released them there. At first, the cubs hesitated. They circled around Scott, but their wild instincts called to them. One by one, they walked into the savanna. Before leaving, the largest male cub approached Scott. He sniffed Scott's hand with his nose, then slowly turned and followed the pack. Scott stood there for a long time, watching the small silhouettes disappear. Part of his chest felt empty, yet at the same time, filled with something warm. From that day on, Scott sometimes thought about those cubs. Were they living well? Were they growing up safely? In his wallet, a photo of him with the white cubs was always kept. And now, 10 years later, the small lives Scott had saved were now fully grown adults protecting Scott. Just as Scott hadn't abandoned them when they were dying 10 years ago, now it was their turn to protect their savior. When hyenas approached, they chased them away. When vultures descended, they threatened them. They protected Scott with all their might. They hadn't forgotten. 10 years had passed, but they remembered. The warm hands that saved them from the drought. The warmth of milk fed to them every night. The gentleness that healed their wounds. The lions still sat surrounding Scott. They didn't move, just as Scott had done 10 years ago. They refused to give up on this life. Another pack of hyenas appeared. The lions all rose together and threatened them, baring their teeth, growling lowly. The hyenas didn't dare come close, circling from a distance before disappearing. The lions sat back down. They moved even closer so they could feel Scott's body temperature. In the scorching midday heat, they shaded his body with their own. Several more hours passed. When contact with Scott was lost, headquarters dispatched a search team following the tracking device signal. 2 jeeps arrived at the scene, kicking up dust. The rangers who stepped out froze at the sight before them. The overturned ATV. Scott collapsed on the ground, and 5 white lions surrounding him. One ranger pulled out his gun with trembling hands. Scott was in danger, and they had to rescue him immediately. The lions spotted them and rose in unison, starting to growl lowly. Their eyes were watchful, their posture protective of Scott.
Get down! Look out! Get down now!
The ranger shouted. But the lions didn't move. Instead, they bared their teeth even more threateningly. Tension hung in the air as fingers slowly touched the trigger, aiming at the largest male lion. That very moment, Scott's finger moved slightly. His eyelids fluttered. Slowly, very slowly, he opened his eyes. Through his blurred vision, he saw his colleagues aiming guns at the lions. Just as one colleague's finger was about to pull the trigger, Scott forced his body upright, enduring the pain throughout his entire body. His arms trembled, his legs wobbled, but he couldn't stop. He staggered to his feet and walked toward the lions. The lives that had protected Scott until just moments ago.
Don't shoot. Please. They protected me.
Now Scott had to protect them. The colleagues hesitated. The gun barrels slowly lowered. Their expressions showed disbelief. The largest male lion slowly approached Scott. He sniffed Scott's hand. A familiar scent. That scent from 10 years ago. The hands that fed him milk. The warmth that healed his wounds. Scott's hand trembled as he stroked the male lion's head. You remembered. Thank you. Thank you so much. The other lions approached one by one. They surrounded Scott. Each sniffed his hands, rubbed against him, sharing memories from 10 years ago. This wasn't a farewell. This was a reunion. The colleagues carefully approached and supported Scott. They headed toward the ambulance. Scott walked a few steps, then stopped. He turned around. The lions sat quietly in place, watching him. The vehicle started moving. The lions rose in unison, and they howled together, a long, long cry that echoed across the entire savannah. It was a song of farewell, a song of gratitude, a song of friendship. Inside the vehicle, Scott closed his eyes. Tears welled in his eyes. Scott lay in a hospital bed. He picked up a worn wallet from the side table. He pulled out an old photograph. 10 years ago, himself smiling with 5 small white-furred lion cubs. Those tiny lives had saved him today. 10 years had passed, but they hadn't forgotten. Scott thought slowly. What if 10 years ago he had turned away from the dying cubs? He would probably have become food for the hyenas. He would have died alone under the burning sun. Through the window, the savannah sunset was visible. Under the crimson sky, in the distance, 5 white silhouettes seemed to appear. If this story touched your heart, please support us with a like and subscribe. We'll return with more moving stories next time.